Hey, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about William Faulkner, an author that up until maybe last year I had kind of sort of given up on in terms of reading. And I say that because about 15 years ago I started reading some Faulkner for the most wonderful reasons, which is that someone that I was interested in at the time said to me, "Wait, you've never read William Faulkner?" And I looked at her, I thought to myself, hmm. I wonder if she would be impressed with me if I read William Faulkner. So I started reading some of his works. I started with As I Lay Dying, which I think is the gateway to William Faulkner for a lot of people, or the short story A Rose for Emily, uh, which I had also read many years prior to that. And I went on a little bit of a Faulkner kick for a couple years, and then I decided to try and read The Sound and the Fury. And that opening section from Benji's point of view damn near killed me as a reader. I was not ready for it. I was not, able to understand what in the world was going on. So I kind of gave up on Faulkner for a while, and I didn't really seek his work out as much as anybody else. And I'm from the South, and Southern literature is seemingly begins anyway with Faulkner uh, in the modern sense. So I kind of was like, well, I'm just going to be like contradictory, just but oh, I have to read William Faulkner. Well, I'm not going to. But something funny happened last year. At the local library book sale, I found two of his books that I'm going to talk about here in just a little bit. And for $1 a piece, I was like, yeah, I guess I'd give them a try. And I really enjoyed them a lot. One of them is probably still my favorite Faulkner of the ones that I've read so far. So I've been on a little bit of a Faulkner binge ever since. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the ones that I have in my collection and just a little go back in time to some of the ones that I read years ago that were all pretty much library books at the time, books that I got from the library. And then talk about the ones that I have now currently, including sort of not really tier list, but building up to the ones that I think are his masterpieces or certainly worth reading, uh, no matter what your interest in his work is, or if you have no interest or whatever. And then talk a little bit about, where I want to go from there, my Faulkner reading journey. So, going back in time, the very first William Faulkner book that I read, because I probably read the short story A Rose for Emily in high school. I don't think it was it may have been assigned in whatever English class I was in at the time. But the very first book of his that I read all the way through is As I Lay Dying, which is gateway Faulkner for a lot, is the gateway to Faulkner for a lot of people. And it contains a lot of the elements that he became known for, like stream of consciousness or talking about class and society and race in the New South of the 20th century, post Civil War, really. And it's it has been a long time since I read it, but it really stuck with me for a long time. It kind of motivated me to go ahead and read some more of his work, and I read The Hamlet, which is the first of his Snopes trilogy. I haven't ever found the other two. I think it's the town and then the mansion. I would like to starting back with the Hamlet. Maybe try that whenever I get time. And then I read The Unvanquished, which I think is his big Civil War novel. And I say big Civil War novel, it's under 300 pages, but it's the one that he wrote that has the most to do about the Civil War from the point of view of Yalta, Patofa County. uh, in northern Mississippi, which he made up. Um, and then I read a fable, which I'm a big fan of Stanley Kubrick, especially Paths of Glory, which is his film set during the First World War in from the French perspective, from the French army perspective. And a fable is similarly set during the First World War, concerns a mutiny among French soldiers and a soldier leading the mutiny who may possibly be the reincarnation of Jesus, or maybe not. It's hard to tell. But it is very much a sort of biblical sacrifice story from what I remember of it. And then I tried to read The Sound and the Fury, and I was not ready. I was just not. It was too much for me at the time, which is kind of ironic because now, as you will see from my little ranking list, well, I'm not going to give it away, but it's up there. So, anyway, to the books that I've read more recently, including the last one that I read, or no, excuse me, the next to last one, the penultimate so far. This one is Mosquitoes. And it's all right. Like, it's one of the ones that, in addition to his first novel, Soldier's Pay, which I also read way back then, uh, it is not set in Yokna, County. It's set in this case, in New Orleans. And it is more of a social class novel, like a rich widow, excuse me, and her heiress niece are taking these artists on a pleasure cruise. I think it's down the Mississippi or maybe on Lake Pontchartrain in New Orleans, and shenanigans ensue. And it's very kind of like, I think my feeling towards it is that if Faulkner had not written it, like if it was not a William Faulkner novel, it would be maybe one of the better novels from like just a generic Southern novelist of the time. I mean, it's okay for Faulkner. It's all right. I didn't hate it. I enjoyed a lot of the sort of interplay between the artist and the widow, and just how over the top everything was. It was kind of silly in a way that I don't think Faulkner is really known for. He's much more grounded and serious and things like that. So it was a nice change of pace, but I would not. I would say like read the other stuff. Read the classic stuff first. Read the stuff that's going to be later in this video first before you read Mosquitoes, because it's kind of like it's okay. Really, is the strongest thing I can say about it. It's enjoyable enough. And then I have The Reavers, which I kind of went into with previous video. But again, another enjoyable enough tale that's not really profoundly as deep as his later stuff, but not everything can be The Sound and the Fury or Absalom. But if you're just looking for, again, like if you've read As I Lay Dying and you're looking for something that's not too terribly stressful or time consuming in terms of reading Faulkner, The Reavers is pretty good. Then next we have Sanctuary, which is actually the book that started me back on the Faulkner reading journey last year, because this was one of the two that I found at the library book sale. And this one is more kind of a crime novel, sort of a psychological thriller in a way, not quite as advanced as maybe that genre suggestion would make you think, maybe, but it's pretty decent. It concerns a young woman who is abducted, and some truly terrible, disturbing things happen to her, and then she kind of visits revenge upon some of the men responsible for what happens to her. And it's not it's not an easy read. It's not a fun read, but it is very good at sort of conveying just the depths of humanity. And I think the more that you read Faulkner, the more you'll realize like he's very good at showing man's inhumanity to man, whether it's because of race, because of gender or class, status, whatever it is. If somebody can be ruthless or cruel to another person, they're going to be in a Faulkner novel. And Sanctuary is probably, of the ones I've read so far, probably up there in terms of that. And apologize, I may have a slight cold for all I know. Light in August. This is currently, I would say, my favorite Faulkner book, and I'm not sure if I could really put it into words. I think Sanctuary was a nice sort of getting back into the groove of reading Faulkner. This one is like, this is one of the three masterpieces of his that I've read so far. And I honestly think after I get done with the list, including the other two, I'm going to pretty much concede that I'm probably not going to read another Faulkner novel that it measures to these three. But the first of the trilogy, if you will, is Light in August. This is kind of a three-pronged story, or four-pronged story, I think. Well, yeah, three or four major characters. We have a young woman who comes to Jefferson, the county seat of Yoknapatawpha. I think I pronounced that right. And she's pregnant. And she's looking for the man who, you know, is going to marry her, take care of her and stuff, because he's gone to Jefferson to work in a lumber yard or a mill, and he kind of has left her high and dry. And so she kind of latches on to this man who she meets her first day in Jefferson. And he's kind of one of those conflicted Faulknerian heroes who's like, what should I do? What should I do? And like he kind of takes his problems to this doctor in town who has kind of let his obsession with the Civil War, and in particular with just a minor skirmish or raid on Jefferson by some Confederate soldiers during the Vicksburg campaign, he's kind of let that take over his life in a weird way. Because, I mean, this is Faulkner, so everything happens in a weird way. And then we have Joe Christmas, who is a mixed race protagonist who is always sort of on the outs with the townspeople. And eventually this leads to a truly horrific act of violence against him by the people of the town. And again, this is, I think it's the longest Faulkner book I've read so far. I think A Fable might be slightly longer, but it's a classic. It's hard to it's hard to summarize, but it's really good. I really enjoyed it a lot, and I highly recommend. I think this is the one. Like I said, this is probably, as of right now, my favorite Faulkner novel, and it's one of the three masterpieces as far as I'm concerned that I've read so far. And now we come to the book that broke me about 14 years ago. No, 10 years ago. Maybe 12. Who cares? Anyway, it broke me back in the day. I started reading it, and it's the first chapter, the first section is written from the point of view, for the most part, of someone with learning disabilities, is probably the best way to put it. Benji Compson, who is one of the four Compson children at the center of the novel. Sound and Fury is a story of the Compson family, who are one of the prominent families in Jefferson, and how their fortunes have changed for the worse. And we get Benji's point of view. We get Quentin Compson, who, in a sort of a flashback section, going back 18 years, um, because at the end of it, Quentin commits self harm. And then we go back to Jason Compson, who has kind of been left to mind the business, mind the store, as it were. And he is not very happy about it. His life has not turned out the way he would have liked it to be, and so he takes it out on everyone around him. And then we end with Dilsey. It's not really particularly from her point of view, the last section, but we do focus on her and her relation to the white Compson family. Dilsey is the black servant who lives with the family, with her family as well, and sort of that divide between white and black that Faulkner was really good at kind of capturing. Whether he would be considered progressive or not, I think it's up for debate in terms of, like, as a Southern white male in the 20th century. He lived from 1897 to 1962. He probably was more open to admitting that racism existed and was holding the South as a region back, and probably America as well. But I think he was sort of on the fence about the civil rights movement during the time that he was still alive. Uh, so, you know, take it as you will, I guess, in terms of whether that is something that holds you back from reading his work or not. I personally, I can kind of separate it. I kind of feel like for his time, he was, you know, a little more open minded, a little more progressive than a lot of his peers would have been. But anyway, Sound and Fury, it's, that first section broke my brain, like I said, many years ago. But this time around, having had more experience, I guess, or more, not really more experience, but more interest in trying to read it, I got through it pretty well. And I really enjoyed it. And up until the next book that I read, I would have said it was his masterpiece. But his actual masterpiece, the biggest masterpiece of his, is Absalom, Absalom. And honestly, I don't think I'm going to read a better Faulkner book after this point. I think this is the one that is his best work. You know, this is another family saga. In this case, it is the Sutpens, I believe. Let me check real quick because, Sutpen. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I really need to do more prep whenever I do these videos, huh? But anyway, it's the Sutpen family, sort of, one of those. If you thought the Compsons were bad, and by the way, the Compsons do crop up in this, because the framing device is first Quentin Compson hearing the story about the Sutpens from an elderly relative of the Sutpens, and then relating it to his roommate in college in Harvard. And it's just this crazy sort of, like, this is also antebellum and Civil War adjacent sort of setting, I would say, where it's another, like with Joe Christmas, there is a character in here of mixed race ancestry, and how he navigates really almost marrying into his white family, because the daughter of Thomas Sutpen, the main guy, falls in love with this man who, as it turns out, Thomas fathered a few years prior when he was in the islands. I want to say somewhere in the Caribbean, uh, and that there's that sort of ick factor, maybe, but done in a way where you're like, oh, how far is this going to go, kind of thing. And it's just a very twisted Southern Gothic tale, just really fun in a way. I mean, yeah, I know it's hard to say that a Faulkner book is fun to read, but illuminating, interesting, never dull. It's I keep saying it's quite good, it's quite good, but really, it is. It's a classic. It is the best Faulkner novel I've read so far, and I honestly don't think I'm going to read another one that's quite as good. I'll read some ones that are very good, but I don't think there's any more classics, to be read. So that's going to take me to the one that I just recently got and haven't had a chance to read yet, and that is Pylon. I don't really have anything to say about it because, again, I haven't read it yet. I have no idea. It might be good. It might be bad. It might be okay. It might be a classic. I don't know if it will be. I'm going to find out. I'm going to try and read it sometime later this month or next month because I really want to. And I really enjoy reading Faulkner now. So just goes to show that sometimes you start reading an author and you think, this person isn't for me. And then like you go back years later and you realize, yeah, this person is totally, this is my jam. This is in my wheelhouse. So anyway, that is my short and sweet take on Faulkner. And I'll think of some other excuse to make a video maybe in about another week or so. And until then, keep reading.